Marshawn Lattimore, 12 yards from Adam.
To the right side, caught by Diggs. Stay back. Oh my God! 30, no, 10. Minneapolis there. Why? Stephon Diggs and the Minnesota Vikings have walked off on the New Orleans Saints.
Minneapolis miracle was short-lived for Vikings fans. Their hope of a hometown Super Bowl for their team was
Case Keenum
erased tonight.
intends to sign with the Denver Broncos. The Broncos obviously were looking for a
on the work and chasing something, the ultimate goal.
Hello?
Hey, Mike. You ready to be a Minnesota Viking?
Yes, sir.
Just really looking forward to getting to work. Can't wait to get back here in mid-April and start working towards the ultimate goal.
Caught by Thielen. 50, 40, 30, and he's loose.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Skull Network, and as of this day, August 11th of 2018, we finally have our first taste of Minnesota Vikings football for this new season, and boy, does it feel great. Now, as we all know, the Vikings just played the Denver Broncos in Mile High Stadium in Denver, and there was quite a few interesting things to look at for this game. Now, there were two major things being looked at by Denver Broncos fans over the course of this game. One being the play of newly acquired linebacker from the draft, Bradley Chubb, and two being the play of quarterback Case Keenum, who they just picked up over the offseason in free agency from the Minnesota Vikings. As for Vikings fans, there was a few more players that we had to keep an eye out for. There was obviously our first-round draft pick from the University of Central Florida, Mike Hughes, and then we also had our two big free agency signings of Sheldon Richardson from the Seattle Seahawks, and of course the biggest one of them all, Kirk Cousins from the Washington Redskins. We also had to take a look at Dalvin Cook, see whether or not he was going to play, and how he would perform if he did. And then there were a couple other smaller things for each team to watch. For Denver, that'd be the play of Tremaine Brock, who they recently acquired out of free agency from the Minnesota Vikings, trying to help replace a little bit of what Aqib Talib had for that defense, as well as the running back play of Royce Freeman, who they recently drafted in the last draft. And then for the Vikings, that would be the play of wide receiver Kendall Wright, who we got from the Bears this offseason, as well as the kicking battle between Kai Forbath and Daniel Carlson, who was actually kicking in front of his hometown crowd. He grew up in Colorado Springs. And before I really get into discussing all these players and how they performed, I'm going to point out now that there were a lot of players that I didn't just mention now in the video that I'm going to talk about because they really caught my eye. And I'm going to try and touch on as many players as I can, but I don't want to draw this out too long, so if I miss someone, then I'm sorry. So starting with the bigger names that didn't really contribute much, or you didn't really hear their name a lot, there was three of them. Obviously, one being Dalvin Cook. He didn't play, so we're just not going to talk about him. Bradley Chubb, he didn't really, I didn't hear his name at all. I don't know how long he was on the field. I wasn't keeping track of him a whole lot, but I'm going to assume he wasn't on for very long. He is a starter on the Broncos defense, so I'm going to assume he was in a series or two, but you didn't hear his name called basically at all. And then with the Vikings, again, Sheldon Richardson, you didn't hear his name at all, probably because Denver's offense wasn't on the field that long, so he didn't have a lot of chances to make any plays. So all those guys, you didn't hear anything about them. Now, starting with the biggest name of them all, Kirk Cousins, you cannot be upset at all if you're a Vikings fan from what you saw from him. 4 for 4 for 42 yards and a touchdown. The man just came out straight slinging the ball. He kind of looked like Brett Favre out there, in my opinion. He was just throwing dimes, the 4 dimes that he threw. The 1 to Stephon Diggs on the sideline, that was an absolutely beautiful throw. It looks like there's already a really solid connection there. And obviously we only saw, one series from Kirk Cousins, but, so far, so good. Now for the Denver Broncos and Case Keenum, it was kind of a different story in terms of how the quarterback played. Case Keenum was under duress quite a bit, so there were a few throws where he just completely missed his target. There was a couple overthrows, and then there was also a couple times where his receivers just flat out dropped the ball. So obviously those are not on him. He was only out there for 2 series, so there wasn't a lot to see, but there wasn't a lot of good things to say about Case Keenum, but once again, he was under a lot of duress. He didn't do well under duress last season, so like I said, it's a little hard to tell. Maybe once he starts getting better protection, once he starts playing with that O-line more and more in games, and starts playing full games with him in the regular season, things will change. And then the last of the big name players for this game, rookie cornerback Mike Hughes out of UCF. He didn't play particularly incredible, but he definitely didn't play bad at all. He had solid coverage. He made one nice open field tackle in the second quarter, I believe it was. And he also returned a couple punts, his longest one being 11 yards. So he had 2 punts returned. He averaged 5.5 yards. So, I mean, he didn't do anything super spectacular. He was on the field quite a bit, so you expected a little more. But he didn't really, make any bad plays, didn't blow any coverages, didn't miss any tackles. I think he returned a couple kickoffs as well. Nothing spectacular there, but, it's early, so there's not a lot that we can go off of right now. And now that we're done talking about some of the bigger name players from this game, I actually want to take a look at a pretty decent amount of lesser known guys who you may not have known going into the game, because there were actually a lot of guys who surprised me and who I wasn't expecting a lot from. And yes, I know it's kind of pointless to evaluate lesser known players because they're not, at the skill level of first teamers, and, they're not elite players and all that, and they're playing against guys of their skill level, so of course they're going to look good from time to time, but I still think that, it is nice to look at them because it's kind of a nice change. And before I get too far ahead of myself, I want to talk about the other 3 or 4 players that I mentioned earlier in the video. Starting with the kicking battle, Kai Forbath actually just did kickoffs, so he had a bunch of touchbacks, so I guess that's pretty cool. But Daniel Carlson absolutely balled out, 4 for 4 from extra points, and then 2 for 2 from field goals, including one. Granted, the wind was at his back, he was in Mile High, so it's thinner air, yada yada yada, the whole shebang. But it's still a 57-yard field goal in your NFL kicking debut is not bad at all. Kendall Wright, he had 1 target. He caught the ball that was targeted to him for 9 yards, so there wasn't really a lot going for him, but there's more preseason to watch, so that's that. And then Royce Freeman, I have his stats right here. He had 4 rushes for 38 yards, and what I watched from him, I was actually really impressed. He seemed like a really patient runner and a really good downhill runner, especially on his touchdown run. He really found that hole pretty easily. It took a second to develop, but I really liked what I saw from him. I think the Broncos might have something there. Moving on to those lesser-known players that I was, mentioning earlier. For the Broncos, there was 2 of them that really caught my eye. The first one being Will Parks. I thought he actually played really well. Once again, granted, it was against, not as highly skilled players as first teamers, but the guy still had 5 tackles, a tackle for loss, and a sack. Playing safety, that's pretty impressive that he had 2 tackles, in the backfield. So obviously they were playing him up on the line quite a bit, and he really took advantage of that opportunity. And then Philip Lindsay, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, he had quite a game. It was 4 catches and 3 catches for 40 yards, and he had that 1 touchdown. But from what I saw on TV, the dude has some serious speed. If he can't make the Denver Broncos team as a wide receiver, which I don't know if he has the skill to, they could totally use him on punt and kickoff returns, or at least on special teams in some way, because the dude can absolutely fly. So I think he made a really good impression tonight. A couple of lesser-known defensive guys for the Vikings that really caught my eye, there was 2 of them. The first one was Sashawn Bauer. I thought playing off the defensive line, he actually did really well. He had 2 tackles, he had a sack, and he also had a tackle for loss. So I thought he actually played really well tonight. And then Jack Tocho, he was playing safety. He had 4 tackles tonight. One of those was a tackle for loss. So, the one or couple times that he was put up on the line or was put on a safety blitz, once again, kind of like the other player from Denver, whose name I already forgot, he made a really good impression with those opportunities that he was given. And then Minnesota Vikings running back Rock Thompson, who I didn't even know existed until this game. This guy absolutely balled out. So, on the rushing side, he had 8 rushes for 29 yards. So a 3.6 yards per carry average. It's nothing insane, but I still think he looks solid in the run game. And then in the receiving game, he had 3 catches on 3 targets for 102 yards, I think it was, and 2 touchdowns, including that one, it was like 70-something yard touchdown on the screenplay. I loved what this kid did in the game. And although Rock Thompson did really well, I do think that, there's a lot more of the preseason left, and that spot for the 3rd Minnesota Vikings running back slot is definitely open, because obviously we got Dalvin Cook, Latavius Murray at halfback, and then CJ Ham is going to be our fullback. But I think Rock Thompson and Mac Brown and Mike Boone all have a very, very good shot at winning that last spot. So it's going to be interesting to see who actually does get that when the 53-man roster eventually comes out. And aside from that, you know, I really liked what I saw from this game. I mean, 42 points in a preseason game isn't something that you see very often at all. And, you know, our first teamers, they all did extremely well. Defense didn't give up a first down. You know, the offense went down the field and scored a touchdown. And, you know, even our second and third teamers, I thought Kyle Sloter was actually pretty good. I mean, there's a reason we picked him up so quickly last year off of Denver. I mean, the kid has a lot of heart. I mean, if you watched him, it was just a preseason game, but every time that he scored, both of the times, you know, he was super fired up. So I'm really liking what I see from this entire Vikings team. Aside from that, guys, I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. I hope you're as excited as I am for football to be back. And yeah, I know, once again, it's only preseason, but I mean, 42 points in a win is 42 points in a win. So if you guys really liked the video and you liked what you saw, make sure to drop a like on it. And if you haven't already, if you're just new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. And I'm going to see you guys all in the next video.